The most successful people in the world all have one thing in common. They've learned how to think big by developing a perspective of possibility. And the good news is, we all have the potential to apply the same strategies to achieve amazing things in our work and lives. Hi, I'm Rob Hartnett, and as your Chief Possibility Officer and host, I'm here to inspire you to become the star of your world as a person of possibility, through learning how people from all areas of life are thinking big and chasing down their dreams. Let's hear from a person of possibility right now. Today, we have the dynamic Julie Thomas, the CEO of ValueSelling Associates and author of the runaway Amazon bestseller, The Power of Value Selling. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. So excited to talk to you today.
Now, where have we got you, Julie? You seem to be very much a California girl, but now you've been over on the East Coast, showing some love over there. Now, have I got you on the East Coast or the West Coast?
Today, I am on the West Coast. I'm back here in my office here in the San Diego area, just north of San Diego, and we've been dealing with some rain. So evidently, it does rain in Southern California.
How's
So
that?
the state has come to a complete halt and standstill because it's been raining for more than a couple of days.
Yeah, that would do it. And you've had, I think you've had rain in Vegas too. There's been quite a lot of rain over there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the storms kind of come through and then they sweep across. So it's been raining in Vegas, it's been raining in Arizona, which means that in a probably 6 to 8 weeks, we are going to have a beautiful desert bloom, as all of the cacti and all of that bloom later. And it's really pretty when the desert goes into bloom. So
We're very lucky. We tend to do that on a daily basis in Melbourne, where I'm from. 4 seasons in a day, they call Melbourne, so it's quite a lot of fun. Hey, look, let's talk about let's get into the book and talk about value selling, and especially the business to business sales market, which is going through a lot of change at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of impacts of outreach rates falling, the rise of AI and generative AI, and there's a lot of shifts going on, sort of seismic shifts in some ways, but there's also some fundamentals. And I just seeing you do a lot of panels, you're around in the market, you're out there in the market a lot, which I love about what you do. You're also out with customers quite a lot. What are you seeing in the market? And especially, it can be a North American focus, but I'd be keen to see what are you all sort of picking up at a strategic level.
Well, I think we're seeing a couple of things. Number one, generative AI is going to be a game changer in so many ways. I mean, AI has been around for a long time, and there's actually been, a fair number of sales use cases for AI. And it hasn't solved all those problems that they thought AI could. And the most common use case that I think of is AI has been used in a number of tools for years to improve forecast accuracy. And guess what? Forecast accuracy has not improved as a result of AI. So the game changer is, as you know, for AI right now is this whole concept of generative. The fact that you or I don't need to be data scientists to start to go in to use AI. And I think it's going to have a number of applications for sales. Certainly our ability to do research and understand key issues and trends facing industries, companies, it can be done in minutes using generative AI. However, the sales professional still has to understand that. And I think one of the things that's coming out of AI is you can't just push a button and get that understanding. You might be able to get the information, but the salesperson still has to be able to digest it to use it effectively. So there's a number of use cases. I think one of the other big use cases that we're seeing is AI for content generation. Can we use AI in our outreach? Can we use it to craft messages? And the answer is probably yes. But I'm also seeing a lot of areas where AI for outreach is going wrong because it just is incomplete. One of our associates shared an AI message she got recently, and it was about how somebody could help her with her dental practice. So somehow the AI bot that she was using found her profile and thought, oh, she runs a dental office, and I have a solution that might be relevant to her. So I think we're all seeing AI gone bad in some of that outreach as well. Um, and I think the third element that's going to really impact sales, and I don't know about you, and I don't think this is a North America only thing. Um, a lot of people distrust technology to a certain extent. And so I think the role of the salesperson is going to change, but I think it's going to be more important than ever for us to be human, to be authentic, to be trustworthy, to be credible, and to add value, not just be a robot or a chatbot. So and 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 we've always said that's important for salespeople. And I think in this automated world, it's going to even be highlighted because I think over time, the bloom is going to come off this rose, and people are going to get a little sick of talking to computers, and they're going to be hungry for an authentic human to human connection.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that is a global phenomenon as well. I actually got an AI contact myself. I hadn't told you this story, but they actually had me as selling vacuum cleaners. So I just thought that was my side hustle. How did they find out about it? Damn it! The AI is really smart. That's been one of my passions for ages. Things that suck anyway, but that's a whole different story. Um, so I think AI 100%. I love AI, generative AI for the area of research. I think for key account planning, it's a godsend. I mean, one of the hardest things on key account planning, and I don't mean just the one plan, but dynamic key account planning, was being able to do those 360s, to be able to get that information quickly. And then, but the real skill, as you talked about, is not actually getting the content, because that actually isn't that hard. Even years ago, it wasn't that hard. But what do you do with it? How do you understand it?
Right.
And I think that's the sense making side of sense making, of understanding what does it mean to you, but then what does it mean to the organization, and being able to have that intelligent conversation. Because at the end of the day, that's what the buyer is looking for. Is they know their own business. They don't need you to tell them about it, but they do need you to give some insight about where it's going. So I think on that side is interesting. But what I found, there was a recent report by Salesforce that, which I found interesting, but I love your perspective on it, which was that the sales profession as a whole is lagging other professions in the uptake of generative AI.
I think that's probably true. And I think that's probably true for a couple reasons. I think organ enterprises are tamping it down to a certain extent because they don't know what it means. And I mean, there's an example of one of our clients here in North America where a sales rep took a transcript from a client call that included confidential information in it. In the conversation, all parties were bound by an NDA, but that salesperson put that into a public AI chat GPT type
Wow.
thing to get a summary and get the bullets. Great application. The company freaked out because it was protected information. Now that's in the public domain. So I think organizations are lagging in what are the guardrails, what are the rules, what and how do we protect our proprietary information that's in the hearts, minds, and hands of the salespeople from getting out into the public domain. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that salespeople in general um, are at a place where there's a little bit of tech tool fatigue. You know, for the last 10 years, there's something like 6,000 sales tech, MarTech vendors out there. And I know a lot of organizations that have bought all kinds of solutions. And the salespeople don't know how to use them, don't know how they work together, and they've kind of had it. And so
Yeah.
this is just the new thing. And just like salespeople, 20 years ago resisted CRM because it was change. I think that's what you're seeing today. And they're not sure how it's going to make them better or just give them more stuff to do.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think once you get into it, you can see the power of it. It's a bit like CRM. I mean, CRM generally failed and still fails. I still see it, and probably so do you, because it's set up for leaders to monitor and get better at forecasting and pipeline, like you mentioned earlier, which it doesn't, because the people who are using it don't see any value in it and actually put in what they feel like putting in when they feel like putting it in. And so the whole thing falls over. I mean, the best CRMs I've ever seen is when the organization basically goes to the sales team, puts up the white flag and says, okay, we tried, we didn't get it right. What would work for you? And they build it around what a salesperson needs at the front line. And when they do that, all of a sudden the magic happens. It becomes useful. It becomes something that the salesperson finds useful. And lo and behold, data goes in. We go from there. And I think the same thing with the AI side. I think also salespeople are nervous about it replacing doing so much more things they did, which is not true. It was a little bit like the internet was a bit like that, and social media in some ways was a bit like that, and CRM was a bit like that. But once they work out they're still needed for this, and I think even more so needed, because I want to tap into something you mentioned a couple of minutes ago. You felt that the sales side, now we've been overdone with MarTech and sales tech and tech stacks coming just like pancakes, right? We're now getting back to humanness in the sales transaction. I want to talk to you a bit about that, because that's also really where your book's coming from as well. We're now people are seeing the one that had that humanness, that human contact. And I think even Gartner started to talk about this after years of tech stack. They sort of go around going, hey, we've got to put the human back in the sales, guys.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit more about that.
Well, so, the value selling framework in my book, The Power of Value Selling, is based, a lot of the value selling framework can be found within that book, is based on a couple of principles. And the first one is people buy from people. And for the types of companies that are coming to us to help them improve their sales productivity and results, they are selling to people that expect to have the sales professionals and revenue professionals that they're working with add value to that process. So our clients typically aren't selling things that people buy without a salesperson. They're typically selling things that are as much a business decision as they are a procurement decision. And people buy from people in that sense. So what does that mean? It means I have to be trustworthy. I have to be credible. I have to have rapport. All of those things that make me a value-added resource, or guess what? You as the buyer doesn't want to spend any time with me. And I think that's true more than ever, because I think that our customers are overwhelmed. I think they are bombarded by salespeople and options and alternatives. And the role of the salesperson is more important than ever. But I think one of the things that Gartner's talking about is the fact that when anything is bought or sold, of course, there's some business case that has to be made from that. But what's the most important thing is what they call the humanistic side of that sale. So it's, Rob, you having the confidence that not only is the ROI achievable, but that the purchase that you're making is in your best interest. And at Value Selling, we've talked about the concept of personal value for years. That doesn't mean that I'm making a bad business decision. It means there's alignment to what's good for me and what's good for the company. And when there's that alignment, I'm going to win more than I'm going to lose. And the salespeople that understand that outperform those that don't.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. And I really like that. I've always been a big fan of both business value and personal value, and I think you well know, it's the business value is sometimes the easiest one to see and the one that gets most visible. The personal value is not so easy to see and sometimes not offered up. And I remember a great example of working with a banker once, and he was really struggling on a deal. He had a great opportunity for a business sale. The business was about to be sold that he was working on. He was helping the new owners get into it, and the CEO, who was the CEO but not the owner. The owner was owner and chairman. He just couldn't get this deal over the line, and he had this CEO wanted to do a buyout, and the challenge was on personal value. The business value was great. The business value ticked all the boxes, but it was personal value, and there's the personal value was two things. One, the CEO who wanted to do the buyout wanted to get in and reshape the business and make it his own. And of course, the founder and chairman, he didn't actually want to totally get out. He wanted to partly get out, but he actually wanted to stay a little bit in control and just stay alongside his baby for a bit longer. And so a clean slate transaction where he was out, even though financially it looked fantastic, from a personal value for him, it kind of left him at a loose end. And it wasn't until the banker understood both and actually spent time with both parties. And so sometimes you can have the one business value. Yes, we're going to sell the business, but the personal reasons why the CEO wanted to do it and the founder wanted to do it were completely at odds end. And when they put that transaction together and both of them understood, it was done in 5 minutes. It was literally done in 5 minutes, but no one had spent the time, that human time, to really understand the person about what's the why behind what we're doing. And I love that
Absolutely.
emphasis on personal
And it's
value.
so important. It's so important. And we know when there's a strong relationship and high trust, we'll often learn it without even having to ask those overt questions, because there's complete trust and faith that we're working in their best interest, not just pushing our own agenda. Um, and it's interesting because often when I'm working with a client, I will ask to speak with one of their customers. And I just kind of walk through our process. Hey, what was going on in the business? What problem were you trying to solve? What about the solution was unique and different? And why did you buy? And what was the impact to you in the business? Almost every time, like almost every time, probably 90% of the time, they tell me their personal
Yeah,
value,
that's right.
and then they tell me, and of course, we were able to build a solid business case to justify the investment.
Yes.
Almost every time they lead with personal value, which
Yeah.
is a fascinating kind of exercise. And I think salespeople that don't understand that will tell you, well, the personal value is to make a good business decision. Of course it is. I
Yeah.
mean, no one wants to make a bad decision,
That's right.
but that is not what's motivating them.
No, it's
It's why
100%.
you could never sell outsourcing to the person whose kingdom was going to be dismantled.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've seen it time and time again. You remind me of a use case in my previous role in my this leadership business that I was I was involved with running down in APAC, and we had this forum with some customers. The normal stories, some customer stories, and one of the methodologies we had was around communication, was a better way of communication and how people do decision making. And this CEO who had put it in through her organisation, we're asked, well, tell me, how has it affected the organization, this methodology of decision making and improving communication? And she's like, it's the CEO, and she's like, big forum, and she goes, yeah, I'd like to talk about that, but firstly, I want to tell you how it's affected me personally and how it's improved my family. And it was a great story, and people were riveted to it. And she's like, oh, and of course, we use it in the business, right? But the biggest thing for her, the impact for her, was a much richer relationship with her children and her partner. And you could not disagree with that. And I think I love that point you made, because it's so true. When you go to back, even if you do, win analysis or why just be asked, or what value has it translated in 12, 18 months, they leave with the personal story. You didn't even ask for it, right? And they'll go with, what's been great is I'm going to free up my time now. I've seen my kids more. I've got this great. I've been able to move back to my home or have my kids go through the school I've always wanted them to. And then you kind of entertain it and go, how about on the business side? Oh, yeah, about that. It's how we are as humans. We talk about the bit that impacted us the most. I really, really love that. You have a concept that's not you. I say value selling as a concept, and I think originally from founder Lloyd Sappington came up with this. But I know you're really passionate about, I am, and we've kind of talked around this. But I want to use the word for it because I love this word. You talk about vision match and having a vision match, and I think to me, even after all my years in this game, that vision match was really a game changer because it helps people go, have you got a vision match? And they think to themselves, well, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. No, have you even understood what the vision of the buyer is, or the buyers, or the buying influencers?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that for you, because you've been using vision match longer than I have. But tell me why you're so passionate about it.
Well, absolutely. So, it's an interesting concept. So, the vision match is a concept of, do I, as the salesperson, know if the customer is answering to themselves, yes, absolutely, your product and services is the best fit for me to get what I need to get. And I mean, it's that simple. And there's three elements to it. And I think value selling and our approach to how we create this vision match, which is our internal word, is more complete than any other methodology that I've seen. Um, almost every sales trainer on the planet will tell their salespeople, hey, before you think about your solution, figure out what problem you're trying to solve. Figure out what the customer's pain is. Pretty standard, right? And yes, that is one of the three components of the vision match. What is the problem? What is the pain? Why would my solution even matter to that person? But there's two other elements that are often overlooked that are really important. And the first one is that problem we're solving? And as silly as it sounds, think of any business, think of your own home, think of your own how you prioritize where you're going to invest your time, treasure, talent, money. We all prioritize that. And you could probably walk through my house and say, oh, that should be repainted and that should be done. And you could probably reupholster that sofa. And for me right now, I don't care about that. So just because you find a problem does not mean that the buyer's worth solving. So one of the first components of the value selling framework is to identify, is that problem connected to a recognized business objective, imperative, issue, initiative that is in focus and recognized by the executives who can release the funding. And if not, you could find yourself going the whole the way through a sales cycle and find out that they say, well, that would be really nice to have, but we don't need it now. So it's that first connection that is really important in the value selling framework.
Julie, I
The
want to pick you
second
up on
one,
one thing, though. I think because you made a
sure.
really also a great point there, but it may have slipped, which was you said that it's connected to it's a problem because everyone's got a problem or they might be whinging, right? And I think it's a really great one. Is the problem connected to a business issue and into a business objective? That's worth solving for the people who can release the funds. And I think that's a really interesting one. So not so much that it might be a business issue that person you're talking to tells you about, but the other great point of value selling is you talk about that people you can't sell to someone who can't buy, right? And so it's is it important enough not for the person in front of me, but also the other people who are involved in releasing of the funds that's at that level. And I think that's a really great point as well as part of Vision Match, isn't it?
I agree. And in a utopia world, there's complete alignment in organizations.
Where's that
We
world,
both
Julie? I
know
want to go there.
we both know that that is not always the case in practice. And the larger the organization, the higher the likelihood is you've got different pockets of people working on different things and different acknowledgement or recognition of what the most important thing to work on. And today that's really important. You said it yourself. We can't sell to someone who can't buy. And many of our clients recognize that they're not just displacing an existing vendor and trying to steal that budget, and it's not an either or. Oftentimes, it's a new paradigm, it's a new solution, it's a new approach. It isn't budgeted. They haven't bought it before. They might not have even recognized that the solution was in the market or possible. And therefore, they have to make that connection. And the bigger the purchase, the more important that connection. If I'm asking somebody to spend $10, eh. But if I'm asking somebody to spend $1 million, you bet your bottom dollar that's going to get a lot of scrutiny and looking at. And does this make sense at this point in time?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's what I like on Vision Match, those components it has, and then of course the Vision Match differentiated. I think is the real key, is that even if we have the Vision Match, are we differentiated in any way, or because if you're not, you're really just on a level. At least you have got a Vision Match, but you're on a level playing field. You're actually no different than your competitor or competitive options, which might not be a direct competitor. It might be some other type of competitor, internal or otherwise.
Absolutely. So we talked about the first two components of the vision match being the problems and their connection to a real business objective. We use the word business issue because that means that business objective might be at risk to being achieved. If I think I can nail my business objective, why do I need to change? So that business issue becomes that reason to change. But the third part of the vision match, which is often overlooked by a lot of salespeople, is before I paint the picture of my solution and capabilities, I want to know what the individual that I'm talking to thinks they need. I want to ask them that question. First of all, it's respectful. If they've
Yeah.
acknowledged they've got these problems, it would be kind of rude for me to assume that they hadn't given at least a nanosecond of thought to what it's going to take to address them. But at the end of the day, it also creates the context for me to understand, hey, how do I have to best position my capabilities in the context of what they already think they need? Because what I've seen some salespeople do, if they don't understand the buyer's view of the solution, and I'm using buyer as a
Yes.
generic term there, um, if they don't understand that, they could start talking about features or components of their product or service that they think is the really sexy part of their product or service. The buyer doesn't care about it. And now I've just given them a reason not to select me. So it's that understanding that solution and then contextually positioning my capabilities under that umbrella. But beyond that, it's, what's better than a vision match is a differentiated vision match, because I don't want them just to be convinced that the category that I sell is what they need. I want them to believe that what I sell is what they need. And we do that by becoming problem experts, by uncovering problems that we either solve better or differently than the competitive alternatives. And you nailed it. Often that competitive alternative is status quo, or I'm going to do it myself. And so it's not always, am I going to buy from vendor A or B? Often it is. And in those cases, I've got to be the best alternative in that category. But it's often, we see just as many people losing to apathy or no decision in status quo as we do to a head-to-head, competitive situation. So they need to be problem experts, because if I can uncover problems that I solve better than the competitive alternative, my solution by default will become the best solution that adds incremental value that my competitive options can't produce.
Yeah, I think it really has to be emphasized. In fact, the data I've done with a couple of clients was who are always in a very competitive, competitive market, highly competitive, yeah, and well-respected vendors that they're up against. But the reality was, when we actually did detailed win-loss analysis, that over 50% of the losses were to apathy and status quo. Right? And that was
Those are expensive losses.
but it was expensive, but it was also a game changer once they realized it, because they realized they were actually asking the wrong questions. They were going up against basically a ghost who wasn't even there, when it was really apathy or no change. It's a bit like you talked about earlier when you say you could walk through your house, which sounds like a disaster, Julie. It needs painting. You got sofas with ripped off. No wonder you've moved out. But if you could have someone, if someone went through there and so you said, Julie, what about this sofa? And you went, well, it's just not a really high priority for me now. I don't really want to get it fixed. But you don't like it. Well, I don't like it. Did you know that we could take it away and we could have this laser session done and we could have it back to you within an hour for $45? You'd go, I didn't know that existed. That's an
Yeah.
interesting service. That's the change. And so in that case, that's differentiating. I had no idea there was a solution like that, because my thinking was 2 years ago or 6 months ago. And so when you bring that kind of insight, and so when they started to realize, it was actually about having a business conversation and getting an insight and understanding, well, what's your vision of a solution? And your vision, again, might have been, well, look, I want to have the sofas really done, but I know they're going to take a couple of weeks to go away, and I just don't have that time right now. When someone says, well, actually, it doesn't take 2 weeks anymore. That was used to do that, but we've got this new technology. You're not even talking about competition at that point. And someone like you, who's a fast mover and dynamic, is going to go, if I can get this done, ballpark price range, I'm done, right? I'll make a decision
Yeah.
on the spot. I think that's why it's just such a great one. I had an example of running a program of value selling down here, and one of the really dynamic, passionate, very smart young Gen Z sales guy, he came up to me afterwards and he said, so I should actually listen to the customer. So before I jump in, he was dead serious. He was very, high C on disc, and he said, so instead of me just going, so instead of me just doing a nice greeting and then confirming what they're after and then launching to our products and features, I should maybe think about what their vision of the solution is at this point. I said, yeah, good start. And he called me a couple of weeks later. He said, sales have just completely changed. I'm getting callbacks from people who used to blow me off. I'm getting meetings now. But he said, I really have to hold myself back. I write it down I write vision match and I hold myself back until I've really heard from them what they think. Because everyone who's got a problem has a solution in their mind. They're not quite sure if it's going to work or not, but they've thought, you said, they've given a nanosecond thought to going, I'd probably solve it like that if I had, as push comes to shove. But they've come out to the market to go, well, how would you guys do it? And so I think, and for him, it was such a game changer for him. And I think it's Gen Z. I think it's been involved with COVID. A lot of it face-to-face meetings he really hadn't done. It was all like this in Zoom type conversations. And he was actually going out and seeing people and allowing them. And he said, I started noticing physiology changes and just I was slowing myself down, and that was okay. And I think that was a really interesting point he made, moving from that Zoom type environment to actually going out and seeing people.
I also think that, in certain pockets of industries, we've created that. So, in software, for example, I've heard companies tell me we do a 15-minute discovery call all for the purpose of getting into a product demo.
Right.
And this whole product-led growth, let me show you the product sells itself. I really only have the salespeople around to chase the paper and do the demo. I think we've created this. It doesn't matter what you want, Rob. Let me show you what I got.
Yeah.
And then we've created a whole layer of younger salespeople that are order takers and just want to talk about their product and don't know how to engage. And quite frankly, some of them haven't ever had to have full adult conversations because they're just used to texting and that type of thing. So I think, you and I both know that sales is all about being an effective communicator. And 50% of being an effective communicator is being a great listener.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just how well you present.
Yeah. Well, I say to people when they do great questions, honor the question. You've written a great question. You've crafted a great question, or AI has, but at least someone has. And what I often find is, salespeople, because they love to talk and they don't like silence, if they ask a really great question, which is a really good question, and the buyer goes, my God, I haven't heard that question. It's a really interesting question. They're actually thinking, salespeople don't get worried about the void of silence, and so I find they do two things. I'm interested in your view. I find they do two things. One, they answer their own question because the buyer was taking too long, or secondly, they bang in three other questions because maybe they think the buyer didn't like the first one, right? In which case the buyer's completely confused and goes, what? Okay, I'll take the last one, right? And have you seen that or noticed that in your career?
Absolutely. I mean, salespeople are so uncomfortable with the silence. They won't give the person they're talking to the opportunity. And if it's a good question, it's probably a little bit thought-provoking that requires a pause and thought. So, I've got one of our colleagues, one of our associates up in Canada says, always have a cup of water when you're making that sales call. And if there's that pause, take a couple sips so that you fight the urge to talk. The other thing I think a lot of people do is they ask really complicated questions.
Right, right.
Like they ask, and which are really 3 or 4 or 5 questions into one,
Yeah.
as opposed to take a beat, take a breath, and ask simple questions that lead to good comprehensive answers. Because if I ask you a very complex question that has 4 parts, it's very difficult for you to answer that thoroughly. So, one of the challenges I gave to an organization a couple years ago, I said, think of who do you think is one of the best interviewers you've seen? Is it a Oprah Winfrey? Is it a Jimmy Fallon or whatever? Just watch how they ask questions. And they're simple. It's an open-ended question. Hey, I just heard that you had this situation at your kid's birthday party. Tell me about that. And then they ask very simple questions to kind of keep digging at and until they get to the funny story or the funny nugget that That's the entertainment value of that interview. But it's really interesting that people are good at interviewing, ask very simple, straightforward questions.
Very true. I love the fact you do that because in some of the workshops I run, I actually bring in, I actually show the video of someone doing that. In fact, we have a really great interviewer. He's not on TV, unfortunately, anymore. A guy called Andrew Denton. And I used to show Andrew in action because Andrew Denton had some of the most incredible conversations and really got into the nub of things and really got into personal value and that had people got quite emotional. But he's talking to him. He said he only ever brings in about 3 questions to the interview. Then it goes from there, and there's three, as we call it, really good open questions. And I think that's the bit. I remember doing some work with again on the client of value selling, but good sales team and two of the sales members they came into a workshop early and they said to me, "Wow!" I said, "How'd you go on the pre-work?" And they're like, "Wow, we got the OPC questions wrong. We're really bad at OPC, open, probe, confirm." And they said, because we really love to get into probing. We got all the open ones wrong, right? Because as salespeople, they want to get into the detail because they're so excited about an opportunity and they're very passionate. And they're extroverts, these people I was with, but they were really taken aback at how, and they loved it, the fact that they would go into probing, and they just didn't until that point, hadn't realized the power of an open question and even how to craft an open question. And so I sort of switched the coaching to me more about the open questions because they could do probing till the cows come home. But what they couldn't do was open questions. And when they started to do that, the conversations they said with their clients was a dramatic change.
So that's so interesting because I often find the opposite. I often find that people are really good at the open-ended questions, but then they're uncomfortable with the probes because they're afraid they're going to get a no and they
Right.
don't know how to navigate back and forth. And generally speaking, they are all bad at confirming. And as a matter
Yes.
of
Yeah.
fact, I think that is an application of transcripts and recordings and AI that salespeople have, I hate to say it, maybe gotten a little lazy and are using the transcript as the crutch. And
Right.
therefore, they're
Right.
not confirming in the conversation as a way to demonstrate their active listening.
Yeah. And I think also the confirmation and one other part of value selling being the mutual plan. I really like the power of that because it's certainly been interesting for me and seeing others as well. I'm sure you've seen it countless times, but how many times when you write the mutual plan, which is basically a summary of a session we've had or a summary of next steps and things we discussed, you give that back and send that back to a buyer, and the buyer at the right time. How many times the buyer has time to reflect and comes back with, yeah, actually, that's right. But I tell you what, I've had a further thought, or that's interesting, but I was chatting with someone else and I think we might need this, or we've now changed the date of. And it's just fascinating to see that little prompter goes back. And sometimes it feels like radio silence because sometimes it sits for 3 days. You're expecting a quick response. And didn't I write it properly? But sometimes it's actually the differentiator. Sometimes value differentiator can be the fact that you actually went back with a real understanding of their business and no one else did. And they start to go, oh, they start to question themselves and question how they're going to do a rollout or have they considered this or that type of thing. Has that been in your experience as well?
Absolutely. I think the plan is really one of the most powerful tools that we teach to our salespeople. And again, the difference is most salespeople follow up and their message is all about them. Let me tell you a little bit more about our product. Here's 10 pieces of collateral about our
Yeah,
product. Here's why we're so great. And they reinforce their piece. The plan as we orchestrate it is a complete confirmation summary exercise of the buyer's reasons to do business with us. And we've got a very deliberate template, if you will. And so as the buyer gets this, and we ask them to review it, obviously, if we're sending it to them, we're asking them to review it. Most of the time they do on their time frame, not on ours, of course. But it is all about them. And because it's all about them, it allows them to clarify, it allows them to expand, it allows them to correct. I've had people say, you know what, Julie, thinking back to our conversation, that is what I said. But what I really meant was
Right, right.
how powerful, because now we've just deepened our understanding, and I'm not off working on this direction where they're thinking we're going in that direction. And so that written, sales is communication, and it's what happens in the one-on-one or the one-on-many and the meetings and the conversations we have. But the plan is we define it in giving the customer or prospect the opportunity to reflect, surrounds that, and enables us to advance that opportunity even when we're not in a conversation.
Julie, I want to pick up on the fact that this podcast is called the It's All Possible podcast, and I want to celebrate you as a CEO, first of all, as a CEO, female CEO of a business that's very male dominated. And I just want to get a little bit of the possibility for some of our listeners out there, especially some, because there's a lot of great women in sales, a lot of great ones, about how you got into this business. How did you get into the area of B2B? And then how did you come to be the CEO of Value Selling? Can you give us a quick summary on
Well,
that?
well, I call myself right now an accidental entrepreneur, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. So, when I went to university, my degree was in finance and accounting. My stepfather was a CPA. My father was actually a sales professional. He had been in sales. He had been in sales management, but he sold a commodity. It was very different. He sold corrugated packaging paper, and so they were winning and losing deals on pennies. And a big part of his business as a sales manager at that point was entertaining and building relationships with procurement people. That was before that was kind of
Yes.
considered, you know, maybe crazy. Like, I mean, and so his customers used to come on vacation with us. They'd come to our cabin.
Oh, wow.
My stepmother was like this fabulous entertainer. They did all this stuff to build relationship so that they could win in those procurement decisions. So he was in sales. My stepfather was in finance. I got my degree in finance. So my first job out of college was in accounting, and I hated it. Hated every minute of it. So literally, but I gave it 2 years because I was told, somebody told me, I don't even remember who, it was probably my dad or my stepfather, told me you got to do, 2 years, you can do anything for 2 years, you're going to learn a lot. And I did. I worked for Shell Oil Company, large company, learned a lot about how companies operated, but I was doing accounting and it was really, really boring. So I quit and I moved from Texas, which is where all the oil companies are in the US, or many of them, moved back to Connecticut, which is where I had grown up, and got a job with this little startup technology advisory company called Gartner Group. And
I've
it
heard
was
of them.
little. Yeah, you've heard of them. So I
Yeah.
worked for Gartner Group, and my first job was doing accounting, but in the sales organization. So
Right.
I was on the team in the group that was kind of doing the data entry on the contracts, processing the contracts, and calculating commissions. And I became good friends with a bunch of the salespeople. And I'm calculating their commissions, and I'm thinking, holy cow,
Yeah.
that is amazing. And these people, I am confident I can do what these people are doing.
Right. Right.
So I kind of started stalking the VP of sales and said, and we had an inside sales group. So it was inside and outside salespeople. And I felt that I could be an inside salesperson. So after about 6 months, I remember he walked in the office and he was like, Julie, I'm going to shut you right up. I'm moving you into inside sales. So I was an inside salesperson. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was so excited. And within 18 months, I was the top performing inside salesperson. And we were doing inside sales. I was responsible for renewals and I was responsible for expansion. And I partnered with a couple of outside people who were out doing the hunting, and then I was doing the renewing,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
So after 18 months, I was promoted into outside sales. And they relocated me, and I was working with some of our top clients at Gartner. I was up in the Boston area selling to large computer companies at the time, and they were our biggest customers. And again, I became a top performer in short term. So fast forward, then I took on I took over customer service. I came back into sales management. And After about 14 years, I took over what would now be considered sales enablement.
Right.
At the time, we called it associate development. So I was responsible for managing a team that onboarded all of our new hires. We did the sales meetings. We were responsible for product training. We were responsible for our methodology, and our methodology was value selling. And we did train the trainer. So I became certified to teach value selling
Right.
to Gartner
So
Group at that
that's how you
time.
came across value selling, because it was the vendor or the
Absolutely.
methodology you were using,
Value
Gartner.
selling
Got it.
was the methodology that Gartner used for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And I had been through other sales training, one of which you know very well,
Yeah.
and it never stuck with me.
Yeah.
I remember going through one that you may be familiar with that had big blue sheets. And at the time, we worked in a kind of like a sales bullpen. So we didn't have walls. We were all in like this big open room. And I remember turning to my manager saying, "Where are we putting these blue
Where
sheets?"
are we putting them?
Because they
Right.
were like poster paper,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this is like day two of a 4-day training class. And he said, "Don't worry, I'm never going to make you do this." And at the time I thought, "Oh, thank God."
What a
And
great
the
leader.
reality was the guys probably should have been fired on the spot. Like he killed the training before we were even out
Yeah.
of the class.
Yeah.
So value selling made sense to me. It just kind of jived with how I thought and how I communicated. When we were doing train the trainer, I became very good friends with the founder of the company. And a couple years later, I got married, and my husband and I moved to San Diego. The only person I knew in San Diego was the founder of Value Selling, Lloyd Sappington, as you mentioned. So what do? You call him and say, "Hey, can you introduce me to a realtor?" Blah, blah, blah. And he and I became very good personal friends through that. He welcomed my husband and I into his social circle, and we were neighbors and all that stuff. Um, Fast forward a couple years later, some leadership changes at Value Selling, or at Gartner, and I was given the option if I wanted to remain with the company to move back to headquarters. Well, that that was a hard no. Headquarters were in Connecticut. My husband had a job in California, so I severed from Gartner Group at the time very amicably. It was perfect timing, and Lloyd Sappington asked me to join as an associate, which was I was already certified to teach value selling. It was a perfect fit. And about 30 days into that, he called me and said, "Jules, I want to take you out for coffee. I've got an idea." Lloyd's about 20 years older than me, and at the time he was in his mid 60s. He's more than 20 years older than me, if I say it that way.
Yeah.
But he was looking to play more golf and was ready to exit the company. And so at that point, we put together a plan, and I took over the leadership of value selling, and over the next 4 years, essentially bought him out of the company. He earned his way out of the company, and he started playing golf every day, and I was leading value selling. I've been doing that now for 20 years,
Now,
and
can
it's
I ask you
been
a
a
question
ton of
though? When
fun.
after you had that coffee and you came back and saw your husband, how'd that conversation go?
Well, first of all, my husband he was running a healthcare company, and he knew what I thought about value selling when I was still at Gartner. So he had actually hired Lloyd.
Right.
So he was a firm believer in the methodology, and we knew a little bit about the business model and the associates and all of that stuff. Um, so he was incredibly supportive. Um, but it was also really scary. And it was really scary for me because I was going into a situation where I had been an executive. I was a group vice president with Gartner. I had great benefits. I had a great salary, to a situation where I wasn't going to be drawing a salary. We were going to be stockpiling away some profit for kind of a balloon payment to the founder
Yes.
over time. And the great news was he allowed us to buy it over time. The bad news was I had to have kind of a down payment
Right.
and then sock away for the end. So it was kind of scary from that standpoint. But he was incredibly supportive, and we were fortunate that he was gainfully employed, and we didn't have to worry about were we going to be able to pay our mortgage and that type of thing. And quite frankly, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. It was the
Right.
best thing that
Yeah. I
happened to
was going to
me.
ask you that. Yeah.
Um, uh, Both business and personally, because I don't think I can be an employee anymore. I love what I do. I think I'm fairly good at it. You're right, it's interesting industry. There's very few female the sales methodology training, company leaders.
Mm,
There's a lot of female sales trainers, don't get me wrong.
yeah.
Um, but in kind of our direct space with our head-to-head competitors, I think I'm the only female led company out there. Um, and we've had tremendous success. When I joined the company, we had about 10 associates. Today we have 50. We had one product in English only. Today we've got a multitude of products, and most of them are translated to at least 8 to 7, in some cases, 17 languages. We've got people like you on every continent representing us, not only to support global multinational clients, but to bring us to the local companies in your market that can benefit from our methodology and its application. So it's been tremendous fun. Um,
Hey,
and I wouldn't change a thing.
so what would you advise, someone who's back, it was Julie, when she was 25, and so someone now who's in sales or looking to go towards the go sales leadership and executive management in the sales space as a female, what would you, any tips?
Well, as crazy as it sounds, I think my finance and accounting degree has really served me well because you have to understand businesses. You have to understand how businesses make money, how money moves through businesses. And I think my financial literacy and that business background, even though it's not what I love to do, has served
Right.
me well throughout my career. Um, so I think that was a really good foundation. Number two, I think I did so well back at in Gartner Group as a corporation because I was flexible, I was eager, I was likable, and I was a high performer. And I think all four of those things, when you're combined, allow you to stay at the top echelons of your management's perspective and top of mind. And I was afforded opportunities. I was a vice president by the time I was 32. I was running teams. I learned so much at that company about sales, about communication, about leadership, about process, bar none. Um, and and I also learned that it's the relationships that matter. So all of that together led me to where I am today. Many of my former colleagues at Gartner are my customers today.
Right.
Even when I left Gartner, they continued with us as a customer relationship for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So it's all very positive in terms of how I was, got here. And so the advice I'd give to somebody is there's no straight line in any career path. And don't be afraid to take advantage of opportunities, even if you know that that's not exactly what you want to do now, because you're going to learn something and get exposure that's going to get you to the next step and that next rung on the ladder to get you where you go. So don't be afraid to take advantage of opportunities that might not be exactly what you want to do. You're going to learn something.
Yeah, that's a great point. That not to take the straight line, and I think that 2 year advice you got early on, even though it was painful, doing all that auditing and accounting, it was actually that business acumen. I think is a really great point that helps you if you ever want to run your own business or buy your own business or get involved in equity in any way. Having that business acumen just puts you so far ahead. It's one of those things. I remember when going through school, people were talking about what degree I should do, where I should go, and someone said, well, you know what? If you do accounting and finance, even if you don't like it, you'll always use it through your life. You might work something out. There's never a downside to doing it. And I think it's actually fair. I think it's really, really true. Whether you go into healthcare or become a doctor, you still have to run a practice. You still have to hang a shingle out. And so I think that's great. Julie, how can people find out more about you? Firstly, we've got the Power of the Value Selling book, which is on Amazon, runaway bestseller. What about yourself?
Yeah, I don't think I'm hard to find. So
No.
you can certainly find me on LinkedIn, Julie Thomas. Please connect with me. Would love to meet you. And also our website is valueselling.com. And if you're interested in learning more about the value selling framework and its as a methodology and its application, there's a whole bunch of resources on there that are free that you can access. And and on there is my bio, my email, my phone number. I actually answer my own phone. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. But LinkedIn is also a great place to connect.
And for all those out there who are tradespeople, Julie will be taking calls for renovations at her home and for renovations of furniture and painting. Hey, Julie, thanks so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Awesome, Rob. Awesome.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the It's All Possible podcast. You can contact me at rob@robhartnett.com or my website, robhartnett.com, or on LinkedIn. Remember to check out the previous seasons and episodes of the podcast and the show notes for more details on this episode's guest. For more inspiration, remember to check out the It's All Possibility playlist on Spotify, which contains a collection of upbeat, positive music I use for inspiration in my live performances. Until next time, live with passion and a perspective of possibility.